Hello, everybody. If you don't mind, we will allow for another 5 minutes for people to give them a little bit more time to join. And after that, we will start. Or maybe less than 5 minutes. Okay, I think we will start. Good evening, all. I'm Billy Tessick, President of NAWIC Qatar, National Association of Women in Construction. I hope you and your dear ones are safe and well. On behalf of the NAWIC Qatar Foundation Board, welcome and thank you for joining us this evening for the NAWIC Qatar Leadership Series webinar on Agile Leadership. How to balance efficiency, inclusion, and diversity. This is the first of the 3 Leadership Series webinars we are holding this month. The next webinar of the series on team performance, getting the best out of teams, will be held on the 22nd of July. And the third webinar will be held on the 29th of July, and the theme will be Resilience, Maximizing Personal Leadership Potential. I would like to extend a warm welcome to our partners and sponsors for joining us. Qatar University, Public Works Authority Ashghal, GHD, Parsons, G-Sonic, ERGA, Turner & Townsend, Qatar Financial Center, LCI, Lean Construction Institute Qatar, DMG, the Big Five Construct Qatar, and TMF. Before we start, I would like to note a few points. The session is being recorded and will be available with a copy of the presentation slides next week. To receive your electronic attendance certificate, you are required to attend at least 90% of the webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat box that's on the right-hand side of your screen. We will answer them in the Q&A session after the presentation. In case we don't get a chance to answer all the questions this evening, we will do our best to include all questions and answer with the presentation slides next week. The webinar, including the Q&A session, will run approximately for 1.5 hours. Your microphone should be muted and your camera turned off at all times. We appreciate your full attention during the webinar. During this time, please stay away from anything that may distract you. I would kindly ask you to submit your feedback on the webinar in the chat box by putting plus for positive feedback or delta sign for your suggested improvements. You can do that during or after the presentation. This will assist us greatly with our continuous improvement of our events. Now we got to the key part of this evening. Let me introduce you our presenter, Rebecca Morris of Paradigm Shift. Rebecca Morris is a corporate cultural and resilience leader. She is also known as a mindset mentor, speaker, facilitator, author, consultant, and a leadership coach. She founded Paradigm Shift in 2011 as she repeatedly saw corporate career leaders allowing chaos to reign rather than choosing effective change. She is passionate about ensuring organizations choose the right cultural model, and this includes ensuring healthy, safe employees by using the right mental health and well-being programs. She brings over 30 years of experience in New Zealand, Australia, and the US markets, and has achieved great sales success in the IT industry, CEO experience in the business coaching market, and senior leadership experience across markets. Rebecca provides high passion, high energy, and has experiential expertise in every client she works with. This has seen Paradigm grow from strength to strength. Rebecca's unique approach shifts leaders as well as businesses. Whether she is in a facilitation, coach, or a consultancy role, she is able to expertly focus on the root cause of behavioral patterns. She gains a deeper understanding of why people operate over the top of these behaviors and sees the direct correlation of these results in the business arena. She is the founder of the annual MORE, Premier Leadership Summit, as she's passionate about solving the systematic issues currently in New Zealand around this topic. She believes that only when we create action at an individual, organization, and community level will this change. Rebecca's first book, Empower Me, The Magic is in Believing It's Possible, was released in January 2016 and is a book primarily based on mindset. This book follows her journey and how her experiences have shaped her life, both personally and professionally. She believes you are what you think, and your behaviors and thought conditions the results you get in life. Her second book, Wonder Woman, What the Hell Happened, was released in June this year. This book is a self-help book to show women how to break through the glass ceiling. Her third book, Observational Intelligent Leadership, is due out in September this year. She has available online Master Your Mindset programs, which were released earlier this year in April. Rebecca will take us now through her presentation on Agile leadership, how to balance efficiency, inclusion, and diversity. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you, and good evening. It's always humbling to listen to the journey, I guess, and it's an avid slide to start with, because I think we can probably all sit back and reflect on, you know, our own leadership journeys. I'm really excited, and thank you to the National Association of Women in Construction for having me be able to you know, host and take these 3 series of presentations. It's certainly a topic that's very important to me as I'm working with organisations of all various sizes around the world and really grasping some of the challenges that organisations are having around cultural resets, around inclusion, around diversity, around mindset, mental health and well-being. And obviously with COVID-19 being very clear disruptor or interrupter over the last you know, 4 or 5 months, I've really started to see some businesses really stop and interrupt the cycle to go, how can we do this better? which is fantastic, because it's the sort of thing that I've been talking about for many, many years. And it's not so great that we've had something like COVID-19 that sort of interrupted us, but certainly good from a let's do something different, let's look at a different way. So this is the first series. Today is about Agile leadership. And Agile leadership can be kind of confusing, I guess. There's a lot of research out there around being agile. Agile is a term that's used a lot around innovation, around technology, around business, around leadership. And so what I thought I would do is really sort of take you on a journey and start with, you know, what is Agile leadership? What actually is inclusion and diversity? And in terms of productivity and efficiency, how do we start to get our head around being Agile leaders and having inclusive and diversity being part of a culture reset? And I've got some interesting research points and you know, really some discussion today for you yourselves in terms of your own leadership competence and capability, and how that translates into your organisation. So I'm going to take you on a journey, and hopefully you've got some paper or online notes to really jot down some things, because I'm going to ask you some really quite thought-provoking questions as we move through this. So let's go. It's I love this slide because I want you to start to, from today, look at things with a new lens. Often as leaders, if we've been in our leadership roles for some time, there's an ability to become a little bit complacent. And what I mean by that is we tend to do things the same way. And, you know, we always do. If we always do what we've always done, we always get what we've always got. And so I want to really challenge you today in looking outside of yourself, in a sense. So standing back and looking back in and going, well, actually, am I happy with the way that I'm showing up as a leader? Am I happy with where the organisation is at in terms of, you know, diversity and inclusion? And if I was to really put a lens on it and have a look at different perspectives, where am I in my own way? So I have a little saying that, and this is maybe something you want to jot down, is I believe leaders are the mirror, right? So everything that you do filters down into your organizations. So what you do is what you see is what you get reflected back to you. And I think that's a really, really important concept to have a look at, right? So if we're not happy with necessarily what we're seeing in our organization or in pieces of it, or with your teams, then I hazard a guess that it's really going to come back to you. What you do is what you're seeing, is what you're getting. So there's some interesting patterns that will be starting to show up for you. Now, the third series, we're going to go more into observational intelligence and having a look at what patterns are. But for the purpose of today's session in Agile leadership and diversity and inclusion, it really is about stopping, reflecting, and going, okay, so if I am the mirror, what is it that I'm doing in terms of my leadership style, or the organization's leadership style and direction, that we need to put another lens on to see things from a different viewpoint? So I have three concepts that I use all the time when I am doing work with leaders. And I believe they're really powerful if you use them in this way. So in order to make a change, it's very easy, right, to go out and go, I'm just going to go and do another leadership seminar or another leadership, you know, paper, or look at some Harvard, business leadership things. But I like to come back to yourself, because we can only really improve how you are and how you show up. And then that collectively, if everyone's doing that, that collectively makes a change. So the very first point I look at when there's things going on is observation. We must observe first what's going on, because that takes out the personalization of what we think we see. Because personalization versus perspective is really, really important to get right. So in observation mode, we're just purely observing and becoming aware of what we see in terms of business patterns. Then we've got to reflect on the why. So why are things showing up like this? Why is it that every time I try to have this conversation, it doesn't work out so well, or there's some issues? Yeah. So we've got to reflect on the why. And often we go, okay, so we know we need to change things, and organizations will do change, and we have to do change, but we'll do it in a big rate, and we're expecting a huge transformation in a relatively short period of time. My argument is we've got to recalibrate, because when we recalibrate the smaller steps in it and be really clear on what that is and the measures around it, then the organization will get a much more sustainable change. Because here's what we know, right? Organizations are made up of people. One of the biggest always dysfunctional traits, when I walk in, I go, what's not working? They'll go, it's communication. It's communication around our teams. It's communication with our suppliers. It's communication around sales. It can be written, verbal, combination of all of the above. Conflict conversations. Who wants to have a conflict conversation? It's performance-based conversations. It's all of that stuff. So recalibration becomes really, really important, because if organizations are made up of people and we want to really have agile leadership and inclusive and diverse cultures, then communication is going to be a key principle across that, and we'll go into that a little bit more in detail. So look for the recalibration process. If you're trying to get some change, or you're making some change today, which I want you to do, what are the 1, 2, 3 steps that you will recalibrate? Even if your organization is going along fantastically well, it's about stopping that and going, okay, so how do I take it from good to great? How do I amplify the potential? Because we've got some stuff that's working well. How do I get my team? How do I get the leadership? How do I get the organization stepping up and taking that next level? So observe, reflect, recalibrate. 3 really important concepts. Observe is what you're seeing, reflect on the why, and then the recalibrate is how do you make those step level changes to get to the success model. So I love this slide, because no matter whether you have teams abroad, so this is a really nice one for those of you who may have teams that you're working remotely. Remote leadership is something I think in terms of around our area in New Zealand, Australia, that we're really grappling with at the moment due to COVID-19 is, how do we manage teams of people who are working in different remote locations. So I love this slide, because leadership is all about you, but your job is to inspire, empower, and serve. So what does that mean? That means that it is your job to inspire others, but it's your job to empower them to be able to do what you need them to do and what they need to do. And it's about serving. It's about, so what is it that I need to do differently? How can I add value to? What do we need to do together in terms of serving? That is, I love that word. So we have to be able to create the conditions for your people to fully realize their own capability. And also for you, not only when you're with them in the trenches, but when you're leaving them on their own to do what they need to do. So one of the things I'm going to give you a minute now, and I want you to just jot down look at those three concepts, right? Inspire, empower, and serve, creating the conditions for your people to fully realize their own capability. I want you to come back and just jot down, where are you at? Are you happy with what you're doing? Are you inspiring them? Are you empowering them? And who do you serve? What are you doing around that side of it? So are they realizing their own capability and potential? So I'll give you, say, a minute of just some time to jot that down, right? So I want you to come up, and if you gave it a 0 out of 5, so 0 is, yeah, no, I need to do some more work on that, and 5 is, yeah, I'm totally inspiring them because I can see, observe, reflect, recalibrate exactly what I need to do. So I'll give you a minute to just jot that down as a good base point starting for today. That seems like a minute, so we'll move on. Come back to this at the end, right? I want you to continually take some reflection time if you can after this presentation over the next few days, because I'm going to rattle your thinking cage in a sense to actually stop and reflect and go, okay, you know, I've taken a lot of these concepts. When you get the presentation and sit down and go, okay, so what is that recalibration move that I can do? Okay, so next thing for you is to look at patterns, right? So patterns for me are a series of incidences or series of, it can be series of actions, series of behaviors, series of incidences, series of, yeah, anything in a series happens more than once that is really important. My observational intelligence, which we're doing in session 3, talks a lot about patterns. We don't generally think about patterns in our business. We tend to go, we've got a strategy, we execute on the strategy, and if we don't execute on the strategy, then it's not working, or it is working, and we amplify and grow and do whatever we need to do. I want to come down to some layers underneath that and look at the patterns, and in particular, the gains, the gaps, and the losses. Yeah, so I'm going to take you through why we need to do this. So when you understand the series of patterns in your leadership team or across your organization, you start to get the power of having an inclusive and diverse culture. Because in the gains, you will have, where you get gains, you're going to have some losses. And then we go, okay, so we've got some gains, we've got some losses. What are the gaps? Where are the gaps? Yeah. So if we were to do very quickly a snapshot of you, your leadership and your team right now in terms of these areas, I want you to just jot down for me whether in these areas, productivity. What I mean by productivity is, you know, how productive is your workforce right now? What's in the way of that? What have you gained? So for example, if I look at COVID-19 here in New Zealand, we had a lot of our workforce working from home, yeah, which is totally new for us. What the research showed is that for the first 6 weeks of that, productivity gains actually went up in the organisation. We were starting to measure across in some of the clients I was working in, and there was a very clear correlation to productivity increasing because of being in our own physical location and our space, and being able to manage things in a different way and not so much stress. So that was a gain, but with that came a gap, right, or a loss. So the loss was a continued little feel of isolation over after the 6-week period, and a gap was this emotional well-being, it started to take a toll. So because everything else that was going on, so there was a gap identified, and whilst productivity was higher, everyone was working more, not less. So we had to really adjust the balance on that. So productivity, what I want to know is, in a snapshot for you, what are the patterns in your organization around productivity? That's the first one. The second one is emotional well-being. So if you look across your organization right now and actually checked in and said, okay, what is the emotional well-being across my organization? What's really going on? What are the patterns that I'm seeing? What are they? The third piece is inclusion and diversity. So what are we doing that is really working around inclusion and diversity? And I'm going to come back and give you some understanding and more understanding of what that is. And then the fourth is, you as a leader of your team, what are the gains, the gaps, and the losses? So I'll give you a couple of minutes again, or 1 minute, just to start that process, so you know when you come back to this later on that you can actually take this and extrapolate it out. So I want to go gains. What are the gains around productivity? Where are the gaps? And have you lost anything? What's missing? What are the losses? Yeah. So I'll give you another minute to just go through a snapshot in your time right now in your organization, your leadership, in those areas. Have a go at that. So what are the patterns, the series of behaviors, the series of actions, the series of things that you're seeing in a different way? So remember, we're looking at this from a different lens, the gains, the gaps, and the losses. I'll give you a minute. Okay, moving on. So let's come back into Agile leadership and diversity and inclusion. So there is a belief now that most business leaders believe that having a diverse and inclusive culture is absolutely critical to performance. But the gap is that we don't always know how to achieve that goal. Because when we start to look at inclusiveness, there's a whole lot of words around bias and subjectivity and perspective that come into that, right? So one of the things I want you to think about in terms of Agile and Agile leadership is, from a mindset perspective, the very key point for me is, in terms of being an Agile leader, we need to be more agile versus doing more agile. And that's a really, really interesting point, because most of us, when we come into our leadership and our working world, we want to do more, right? So we believe that we do is better because we can get direct correlation of output. I want to argue that we have to be more agile, and that's around changing the way that we think, the way that we're using innovation and innovative thinking, or I call it locked-in thinking, to unlock the locked-in thinking. And it's around being more agile is about having to really understand more around our behavioral patterns, the changes that we need to make, and the collaboration across organizations. So if we know that we have to have a diverse and inclusive culture because it's critical to increasing in performance, even if we've got an organization that's doing really well, we now have to go, okay, so let's come back into seeing what Agile leadership actually is. Yeah. So I'm just going to move this. Deloitte's research, Deloitte have a lot of research around this topic. So I love it because there's a very basic formula here. So diversity plus inclusion equals better business outcomes. So that's pretty basic, right? So if you've got diversity and inclusion, you're getting better business outcomes. Diversity without inclusion is worth less than when the two are combined. So that's the powerful statement there. So diversity without inclusion is worth less than when the two are combined. So if we know that, and the research is there, then my question is, if you come back to your organization, what are you doing around diversity and inclusion, and why aren't we doing more? Because if we know that inclusion is worth less, so the research is very evident that people, in terms of coming into an organization, they want to know where they belong. They want to have purpose. They want to have receive feedback. They want to know what their place is in their cog in this world of the organization. And they want to know, I talk about impactful contribution. So they want to know where they can make impactful contribution, because most of the time, 95%, people go to work to do a good job. And so when we come into here and go, well, we've now got to go, we've got to start to turn things on its head and look at things from a different perspective. So let's have a look. I love this slide as well, because again, I just wanted to give you some research at the beginning around inclusive leadership and team performance. So this is, again, it's based on a Deloitte study of 105 leaders. It's assessed by 600 raters across 6 signature traits that they have in terms of their profiling of inclusive leadership. So what this says here is there's obviously a direct correlation where the more inclusive leadership is, obviously the team performance increases. So plus 70% here, right? So with inclusive leaders, individual feelings of belonging, like I said before. So this means that there's an increase in experiences of fairness. Am I treated fairly? Is there respect? Is there value? Is there belonging? Is there psychological safety? When I come to work, do I feel safe? And is there inspiration? Yeah. So from inclusive leaders, if we can actually understand what drives at an individual level, this is hugely powerful and some really quick gains in a short period of time. And then when we look at the team performance, the research says here that there's a 17% increase in team performance, 20% increase in decision-making quality, and 29% increase in team collaboration. So when I'm on site and I'm working alongside leadership teams, it's really interesting, because the 3 barriers that I see all the time is I can't seem to get my team to collaborate together. There's this real wanting to control my own space, right? There's poor decision making, or what I mean by that is there's an inability to want to be decisive and make decisions. So it's about, I'm not sure I want to do that because I don't want to be treated, feel that I've got it wrong, etc., etc. And the team performance, I see organizations really trying to grapple with, how do we measure team performance? And most of the time when I come back and have a look at performance reviews and performance management and performance and capability, it's because we're not developing our individuals at an individual level. And development is going to come back to a lot of these individual feelings of inclusion, right? So in order to have someone show up and feel all of the stuff around feelings, and inclusive is a lot of emotion attached to that, then we're never going to get an increase in team performance. We're just going to actually have status quo, or in a sense, after a period of time, complacency, and I call it going through the motions. So again, if we start to think about inclusive leadership, diversity, inclusion, and Agile, the Agile piece I'm going to come to now, but yeah, just have a think about, where is it that are you getting these kind of numbers in terms of if you do have an inclusive leadership, if you have inclusive leaders, then are you seeing this type of performance gain? And if not, then we need to look at the gains, the gaps, and the losses. Yeah. So what is diversity? So I wanted to come back in and talk about just a point in time baseline. So what I believe the best decision the best definition is diversity in a workplace means that a company has a wide range of diverse individuals. And that's pretty logical, right? Because we come back to organizations are made up of people. How every single individual shows up into your organization every single day, regardless of where they work, which door they come in, which office they work from. However, each individual comes in to your organization every day, including you, is a direct correlation to the overall performance of the organization. And so we often have this myth that, you know, we have this great working culture. But a culture is actually made up of individuals who choose to have impactful contribution or who choose to come in and actually show up with a mindset that is, yeah, I'm actually in my powerful state. We'll do some more of that in series 3. And I'm here to actually do the best I can, and I'm empowered, I'm inspired. And remember the first slide around leadership, I'm actually able to bring my best self to work. So if I bring my best self to work and I'm leading and I'm showing up, then I am going to be diverse, because we want to have that diversity in terms of bringing our whole selves into the organization, rather than I'm going to leave part of me at the door and bring part of me, this compartmentalized person as you. We have to have the real you showing up in order to get the real performance. So diversity is often misconceived as solely multicultural matters, but it also applies to diversity of gender, race, ethnicity, age, sexuality, language, education, and background. So when we start to think about that, we now have we've got organizations spanning generations of age, right? And that brings with it another diverse perspective in terms of how each of those generations think and work. So if that's the definition of diversity, already we've got a whole lot of stuff now that we have to go. We've got a culture, we've got a set of parameters that we want to go by, we've got a strategic direction, and we have execution on that. And now we've got a whole bunch of individuals who span a whole diverse gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, language, educational and background. So how do we even start to look at making that work? So what I loved about this slide here is inclusion. If inclusion is where we start to have a lot of this emotion, because inclusion is also about gender. It's about culture of genius. This is the whole unlocking the genius in your individuals, yeah, that they have, that they may not necessarily be using or utilizing today, because there's a feeling that it's, remember I came back to that psychological safety, that they can't be different, that we have to somehow deliver on the same. This here has a real direct implication on belonging. Do I actually have a sense of belonging? Do I feel like I'm actually respected and or have an ability to be me? Learning disabilities, the way that people process information. For example, if you have a sales team, one of the things that I was talking to a leader the other day, has a field sales force of 25 people on the road. And the barrier to success was actually the collaboration of the team. Yeah, they weren't collaborating together. They're quite individually incentive focused. So I said to him, so how do you manage that team? So when you get them together weekly on your calls, what do? Oh, we're all on the phone, right? I said, okay, so let's have a look at that. Most salespeople are highly visual people, so they need to see, and they're kinesthetic, right? So they learn by showing me how. So if they're highly visual and they're kinesthetic and they process information in that way, having an auditory-based conversation isn't going to work for them. So why not put another lens on it and go from here on in every Friday morning between 8 and 9, we're going to have a online call that has the ability to see each other actually and connect with each other, and then we can start the collaboration conversation. It's about learning difficulties of people with dyslexia. It's about how am I actually across my organization and my inclusive strategy making sure that people are feeling that they are treated with respect, treated fairly, a lot of those inclusive things that we talked about before. And mental health is becoming so critical and so important in terms of, I think, the follow-on from COVID and this realization that, coming to work and working 60, 70, 80 hours is fine, but it's not sustainable. So what are we doing in terms of providing resilient strategies, mental health and well-being, to ensure that our teams are emotionally well? Because the research now is saying that, years and years of highly stressful environments where we're working insanely or intently is now having detrimental emotional issues with both male and female genders, and in particular with males. It's actually now the research is now saying we need to start to look at making sure that in our inclusive and diverse strategies that we have a section around resilience and ensuring that our people are well emotionally. So I really like that. So coming back to agile leadership. So agile leadership. So when we think about agile leadership, if we want to have agile and we want to make change happen, one of the confusing myths or one of the beliefs around agile and leadership is that we have to do things quickly, right? I want you to think more around agile leadership is agile versus good leadership mindset, right? So good leadership is good leadership, right? Agile is being. Remember I talked about before being versus doing. So agile to me is about unlocking some innovative ways and thinking in terms of our leadership. It's about looking with that lens. It's about looking at the observational awareness and being agile enough to respond in a way that allows good change, versus let's do this because we're going to get a change. So let's take that another step. If we look at the 3 C's of agile leadership, I've just put them into 3 C's for you. The distinction between good leadership and agile leadership is really these key 3 points, right? Communication. Communication is imperative if we have good agile leadership. So where are we developing our conversations, our people, right? Exactly what I talked about earlier on around observe, reflect, recalibrate. Communication is about developing better, more efficient conversations. I'm talking about efficient communication now, because communication is the only thing we have. It is the currency in organizations really at the end of the day, because it is the thing that brings everyone together. Because again, organizations are filled with people, people communicate verbally, written, etc. And the one thing that shows up the most in terms of dysfunction is communication. So what do we have to do? If we're agile around it, we've got to develop and have more efficient conversations. We've got to do the reflection process. We've got to sit down and go, You know, why? Why is this not working? Let's look at baseline. What's going on today? What are the patterns? Let's look at success. What do we want success to look like? Even if we are doing well, don't fix what's broken, what's not broken, right? Reflect, and then the learnings around that, right? Okay, that didn't work so well. Fail fast. Yeah, fail fast. Move forward. So communication is critical for Agile leadership. And this is where Agile leaders are able to have the right conversations so that the message lands with the person, people, teams, suppliers, customers that they need to have. And that's where the preparation work is so critical. It's really fascinating because I go in and I'll say to people where communication is a challenge, perhaps, and a barrier, and I'll go, so if that conversation is super important and it has a direct correlation to the business moving forward or whatever it is around performance metrics, then how much time did you put into preparing for that? And it always amazes me because for whatever reason, the distinction between putting in time to actually prepare for those conversations isn't there. So I'll come back and go, Agile leaders must have good time-based value, right? Around, and communication is part of that. So time-based value is, am I spending my time adding my value in the right places? I'll say that again, time-based value. As an Agile leader or as a leader, am I spending my time adding my value in the right places? And communication, if that is a key core concept of Agile leadership, then what am I doing in terms of adding value to the conversations that I need to be having, whether that's at the leadership team level, whether that's at a team level, whether that's at an individual level, whether that's at a supplier, customer, etc. level, right? So communication is the first C in terms of Agile leader. So if we want to be an Agile leader, get that right. The second is that continued commitment and consistency. Consistency is huge, right? So it's about inspire. I come back to that very first slide, right? Inspire. Am I inspiring you to be the best you can? Inspire. Inspiration is huge, right? When you actually have people that can see that you're inspired, then they will do what it takes to have things happen. Engagement. Am I engaged? Am I complacent engaged, or am I engaged? Am I actually doing what I want to do? I have this lovely saying around doing our best work, because when we're doing our best work, we're doing the work we love, which is our passion. We're doing it the way we like, with the people we like. It's a really simple concept, but we come back to this and go, am I doing the work I love? Am I doing it the way I like, with the people I like? I love what I do. Every day I get up, life's like a box of chocolates, never know what I'm going to get, right? But I love the change. I love the seeing people grow and develop and see the light come on, right? So for you, ask that question. Are you doing the work you love? Are you doing it the way you like? Are you doing it with the people you like? Because that is the consistent commitment. Because when you're doing that, you have commitment and you are inspirational and you are agile, because you're engaging and you're unifying and you're creating that safe place for your teams and people to work together. And the third C is collaboration, right? So this comes up all the time, and it comes up in inclusive leadership, right? So collaboration now is, how are we empowering our teams to work across the organization, empowering them to bring to the table a whole bunch of different concepts. They're out in the field. They know more than you, perhaps. They know what works. So allowing them to come in and have and feel inclusive and feel that their perspective, whatever that is being heard, that they're feeling part of that, so they can achieve and the organization can innovate and move forward, not only from a product and services perspective, but in terms of a team perspective as well. So how do we innovate? Not just about systems and processes. How do we innovate our thinking? How do we innovate our people? So the 3 C's, communication. Actually, I should probably put another one in there, which is consistency. So I might turn that into 4 C's. So communicate, have a look at that. Commitment, that's the consistency, and collaboration. Where are you at across that process? So let's have a look at the next one. What I decided to do here is give you, whoops, I've just lost my slide. Forgive me. Whoops, here we go. 9 principles. I've decided to give you some principles for good agile leaders, because it's things again that you can take and draw down underneath this for yourself and go, okay, where do we need to, what are our patterns around these themes or these principles, and what do we, where are our gains, where are we getting the gains, where are the gaps, and what do we need to lose? Because remember, if you're getting a gain, you've got to let something go. If we're looking at efficiency, yeah. So in order to have good agile leadership, I love this one, right? Actions speak louder than words. You have to be the change, not do the change, you be the change. So if we're looking to create a really good diversity and inclusion leadership team and leaders that are agile and able to really get a grasp on this, consistency of action is going to be paramount to have any change. And so if you want to be the change, then you've got to start to be really aware of your own leadership style, right? This is your brand, your identity. When I come in and I do leadership, work with leaders at an SLT level or an ELT level, we'll go, okay, so what are the key principles that you bring to have impactful leadership to this table, or impactful contribution to this table? And there's usually deadly silence, because we talk about what we do in our silos. So yeah, I'm responsible for regulatory building change, right? Or I'm responsible for services and assets. I'm responsible for marketing or sales, but we're defined by what we do rather than how we're showing up. So if we want to make a change to have good agile leadership and teams and organizations that have a good, diverse and inclusive culture, then the first thing we have to do is look at ourselves in the mirror and go, okay, so where am I being the change? What do I need to do at my level individually to be the change in this organization? So that's number 1. That's some stuff really that some of us, we haven't done any personal development or done any work around mindset, behaviors, and how we show up. Then that's a really nice start, because our thoughts, the way we think every day, the way we get up, the way we show up in our organization every day, our thoughts and beliefs create our reality, right? So whether it's good thoughts or not so good thoughts, doesn't matter. It actually impacts on the way that we show up and it becomes our reality, whether it's true or not. So whether it's personalized, whether it's perception, or whether it's perspective, yeah? So actions speak louder than words, number 1. And it's hard to do that, right? Because how do you measure? We've got to, number 2, unlock our locked-in thinking, which leads to a different lens. So one of the things that I've created is a model around, in order to make change, we have this such a locked-in thinking mode. And we go, okay, so we might, for example, change a physical location or change something, but it's not, we've still got a locked-in thinking mindset. And if we want to be good agile leaders, remember it's being, which actually then helps us innovate change, then we've got to unlock and look and really see what our locked-in leadership or locked-in thinking is today. Because I hazard a guess that if we unlock that, then that allows us to have some innovative change in terms of our thinking. And our thinking across collaboration helps inclusive and diversity. So unlock the locked-in thinking. Efficient communication is number 3, and we've talked a little bit about that, right? So the 3 C's to efficient communication. Because again, I'll say it again, Organisations are filled with people. People show up. However they show up every day, whatever their mindset is, however they're thinking is a direct correlation to the overall organisation performance. So efficient communication has to be paramount, right? What are we doing to ensure that we are communicating efficiently? And I don't mean streamlining our emails. What I'm meaning is, are we doing the preparation? Are we actually understanding what it is we're trying to achieve at a meeting level, at a board level, at every single level? Do we actually know what we're trying to achieve if we're looking at good agile leaders and inclusive and diverse processes? So next one is understand the purpose and identity. So our teams are our individuals, so use the lens again, step outside and look in. We may think we are, but the reality often is that there's a little bit of work that we need to do, right? So do we understand the purpose and identity of what it is we're trying to achieve for our people? So do they have a sense of belonging? Because when they have a sense of belonging, we know that they feel safe, they do their work, they do more than their work, they do their best work, yeah, because they feel like they're doing the work they love and the way they like in the organisation. So are we really clear? This isn't a vision, mission statement. This is, do they understand the direction that your organisation is going in? And if so, what is their purpose and part of that? That's a different conversation. How do they feel that their identity and their contribution is allowing them to have a sense of belonging? Because when you have that, you're good to go. Next one is bringing your whole self to work. So this is, I have this conversation all the time. So we talk about, and this is particularly relevant for women, I think. Sometimes we have this thought process that we have to leave our home life at the door. Now, I'm not saying you come in and you bring your home life into the conversation all the time. That's not what we're doing, but we can't compartmentalize ourselves because we are whole people. We have a whole persona, and we have a process around how we think, remember our thoughts and values and mindset, where we think drives how we show up. So if we're bringing our whole self to work, we're not consciously or subconsciously trying to shut off some of our stuff and trying to keep it down, because that actually takes up more energy. And the more energy we're trying to do that, we're losing. So there's a gap. So there's a gain in that people aren't getting to see the whole me, but there's a loss because actually it's taking up too much time to keep a handle on that. Whereas if we do show up with our whole self and our persona is our persona, it allows us to be who we are, be the change, and unlock our locked-in thinking, because we are actually real. We're real, we can be real. So this is using emotion in a different way versus compartmentalizing ourselves and splitting ourselves in half. And I think this is a real key concept to get our head around. But not only that, it's like, well, how do I do that and do I feel safe? And if we've got this identity of purpose and belonging, and we can feel that we have efficient conversation and communication, then that makes it a whole lot easier to be able to bring our whole selves to work. Leadership immersion across the organisation. I love immersion learning because one of the things in terms of the new cultural models and some of the cultural models we're looking at is there is such diversity in perspectives and thinking that instead of having a hierarchical based leadership, we can still do that from a positioning point, but in terms of taking initiatives and looking across the organisation, starting to bring through some of those diverse thought processes, perspectives, understanding, and bringing them into an environment where we can teach and guide them, and they're learning off each other the power in that stuff is huge. It's and I call it immersion learning or immersion leadership. So it's about getting, you know, those group and going across the organization instead of going up and down. And if you haven't actually considered that, there's a lot of research around that, and I do that all the time when I'm working on site with leadership teams to bring through some of that perspective, but also you're developing your leadership teams through. Next one is powerful, not control-based leaders, right? So there's powerful leaders, which are great, right? So you are being the change and you are showing up and you're powerful and you're right in terms that you kind of know who you are, right? You know who you are, you know what you stand for, and you have a very clear leadership persona. And you are being who you are. You're being an agile leader, yeah? You're not doing agile leadership. Versus control-based leaders. So this is command and control, or control where in order to be a good leader, I think I need to fix everything for everyone. So I need to control everything so that if I can control everything, then I can help people. And if I help my team, I'll help them by fixing or doing or commanding, yeah? That never works long term, because what it does is, if we're trying to understand agile leadership and having a diverse and inclusive culture, the first thing that is going to not work is having control-based leaders. Now, I'm not saying that you don't have good structures around performance and one-to-ones and group and team sessions, etc. I'm not saying that at all. And there is a definite need for that. But it's about, if we're being inclusive and we want agile leadership, then we need to move the control to a more powerful, power-based. So it's using your power in a different way that allows you to have more efficient conversations that get what you need without having to take control. And that's a really important one to get our head around, because that's one of the key barriers in terms of inclusive cultures not working. This one here we sort of touched a little bit on, but great ideas come from across the business. So my question to you, if good agile leadership is in place, how are you capturing those ideas that come from across the business? Yeah. So your teams, in terms of what they know and what they do, they will know more than you. So how are you unpacking or unlocking that and allowing them to bring those ideas? And then I love this one, because it's a collectively powerful group versus pockets of power, or power pockets. So when we've got this collectively powerful leadership team who are doing agile leadership, you are going to have much more of an inclusive and diverse culture as a result, with better team performance, collaboration, and thinking, because people are seeing their purpose, people are seeing their direction, you're being consistent in how you're doing this stuff. So it's a collectively powerful model, and where I've walked in and worked with leadership teams to take them from quite a disparate, not being able to have robust conversations, not being able, without them being highly personalized, this collectively powerful model, boy, what progress you can make in terms of, not only in terms of sales or performance or whatever it is there, but in terms of whole organization. Because remember, you guys are the lead, you are the mirror. What you do is what you see is what you get. So if your leadership team isn't collectively powerful, guess what you'll be seeing down the line? That mirrored effect is across. One of the patterns will be it's everywhere, from the top down and the bottom up. So have a good look at that. So in my view, those are the 9 principles to really start to get your head around to have good agile leadership. So just a little stop point there for you. So just taking what we've heard around agile leadership, because I'm going to go more into diversity and inclusion now. So just another minute, where do you need to interrupt your cycle? All right, so if we stop, you're going to hear me talk a lot about this, because I want to stop the cycle right in its track and go, okay, so what are the things that you need to add in, stop, start, change in terms of Agile leadership? I'll give you a minute, excuse me, just to jot down some of the ideas that you have so that you can capture those when you get this presentation next week. Okay. Now we're going to look at the lens again. So what I love about this is I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey with diversity and inclusion, right? So here's what I think. So we've got Agile leadership, right? So we're now doing Agile leadership, or we're on our way to doing that. So what are we doing in terms of stopping and interrupting our cycle and understanding more around diversity and inclusion and looking at the revolution around that? So again, I've given you 7 steps and a bit of a journey. Whoops, here we go again. I'm going to come back into here. Number 1, progress will need a culture reset. Oops, I'm just going to go back to here. Just checking you can see me okay. That's cool. Step number 1, progress will need a culture reset. So in order to start, you are going to have to look at resetting the culture. So we've got to stop and interrupt that cycle and reset, right? So culture reset, yeah. Number 2, you're going to create a shared purpose and meaning by broadening the narrative to diversity of thinking. So you need to start and have a look at creating a shared purpose and meaning by broadening your narrative to have this diversity of thinking and inclusion. Number 3, you are going to build inclusive leadership capabilities. So come back into what we talked about before around Agile leadership, right? Have a look at inclusive leadership capabilities. Go to the areas in the softer side, the softer skills that perhaps you haven't had in place before. So you need to put those inclusive leadership capabilities in there. This number 4 is critical, right? You need to take your middle managers on the journey with you. And this is where the translation of message is so, so important, right? We need to take the middle managers on the journey. And in order to do that, often we give training or personal or professional development, but it's more at that technical level. What we have to do is we've got to actually teach our middle managers in terms of, because they're actually the glue, right? So they're actually leading by managing and leading. So we've got to actually have them understand and bring them into and have them part of and contributing in terms of the inclusive leadership capabilities. Because when we get that bit right, we're going to see a whole lot more around team performance capability. We need to also address behavior changes by rewiring processes and practices. So this number 5 I love because I use the terms, we've got to rewire some pathways, right? So we've got to unlearn the stuff that is no longer working for us and relearn new ways of doing leadership, right? Or bringing in inclusive or doing the culture reset. The behavior change is the thing, that is the outcome, right? So that's the outcome that we're looking to achieve. We've got to come back in and go, okay, so how do we get those behavior changes? So we've got to rewire some processes and practices at an emotional level, at a people and capability, at a mental health and wellbeing level, right? So we've got to rewire and address the change there. Number 6 is strengthen the accountability, recognition and rewards. So have a look at how are we holding everyone to account? What are we doing? Yeah, in terms of holding everyone to account. Accountability is huge for me. I walk in to organizations who go, yeah, we're not getting our team performance right. We're trying to be nice and have everyone and do more for our teams, right? But here's the thing. If you're nice and you're doing more and you're helping and you're doing that stuff, you're not actually giving them the tools, you're not giving them the boundaries, there's not a clear set of expectations, and there's no accountability. And on the other side of that is, well, actually, I did do all of this stuff. Where is the recognition and reward? And remember, right back at the beginning, we talked about my sense of belonging and my identity in the organization, and I want to come to work to do a great job. So where is the recognition and rewards there? And that helps me have that sense of belonging. And number 7 is really paying attention to diverse employees and customers. And what I mean by paying attention is, how am I going across the organization and bringing some of those people in who might have learning disabilities, who might think in a totally different way. When I was growing up, I go to the end of stuff first. So I always go to the end when I'm thinking about something, and then I come back to baseline, and then I create my how. That doesn't mean that I don't have it the right way. That's just the way that I'm wired around how I think. So if we actually start to think and unpack how our organization's working and how individuals are in there, then why are we not doing more around embracing the strength? Because that strength is a powerful one to bring into a project, bring into whatever that is. It's more around collaboratively understanding. It's about understanding at a team level how we process information, how we think, what's our personal lens, what's our trigger cycle, what is it that we do, and collectively bringing that together to have a much more empowered and collaborative and diverse strategy. So my last slide here, I think, is in the end, just to sum up, if we look at going to the end goal, what does success look like, right? So this is where we come back into agile leadership, having a good, diverse and inclusive culture. The end goal should be redefined. So it's about taking what you want it to look like at that success level and coming back into baseline today and going, okay, so here's my baseline and my patterns, here's my success. What is it that we need to do in terms of my culture reset where the behaviors are reshaped? And then the second piece is, I want you to step up and own that change, because at the end of the day, this is only successful if you collectively look at making the changes to be collectively powerful. And I always come and finish off with, you know, for me, it's really interesting because people will go, oh, yeah, I know all that. I know all that. And my question will be, well, if you know all that, why are you not activating change, right? Because change is the one thing where you stop the cycle and go, I need to develop further, go from good to great, or I've got some stuff down here that I need to get to baseline because it's not working. And I need to step up and be the change. I need to step up and do the work that will empower, serve, and inspire my team to bring out the best in them. So leadership is, for me, about choice. You have a choice to do it or not, frankly. And if you choose not to do it, then kind of that's another path. I hazard a guess that you're not doing the work you love. Because if you choose to do it, you will want to inspire and you will want to empower and you will want to serve and you will be able to do this as you collectively grow. And I just want to leave you with kind of the last slide, which is really interesting concept to think about. What stands in the way is the way until you shift it. So look at that from a personal perspective, a personal leadership perspective. What stands in the way is the way until you shift it. So that's it for me. I'm going to just hop out of there because I'm hoping that you can still see my slides. And I'm going to pass that back to Billy.
Okay, great, Rebecca. We have a few questions, so I will read them to you.
Did you see the last few slides, or did we lose that?
We lost that.
Oh, okay, right. I'll see if I can pull that back up. Okay, go. Do you want to go for questions? And
okay. So you gave us some great tips and ways on how to start developing or develop further our agile leadership skills. And once that's decided that agile leadership is the way, and it seems to be the way, given all the circumstances, sort of local, global, people behaviors, world dynamics. That seems to be the way, the answer that can satisfy, improve, and address issues to sort of tailor the solution to whatever the issue may be, because depending on the industries, depending on the levels and hierarchies, the requirements will be different. So at what stage we can start measuring how well we are doing as agile leaders? And you talked about the change, and we all know that not everybody, even when we think that we are ready for change, once when something starts changing, there is a slight uncomfortable feeling. So what would be your advice on that, and how to deal with that?
Yeah, cool. Good questions. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because as we talked about, I think the first piece to that is making really sure that you are strong and confident in the change strategy. So what you're trying to achieve. So whatever your success matrix is there. So it's about being really clear that that's the direction that you want to go in. Yeah. So what we know is the first step is this uncomfortable, and I think I might do this in seminar 3, but there's also, and when we go through a change process, I liken it to almost like a grief process in a way, because people are really resistant to change, because change is all about the fear of the unknown. Yeah, it's because we haven't done it before, or we go, oh, here we go again, and so because we've learned as individuals in our years of experience, we've learned strategies in our little box that we put ourselves in to deal with stuff, right? So we've learned strategies to put in place to help us to feel safe. And so when we look at change and resistance to change, it really comes back to fear of the unknown and fear of, am I going to be safe? And if I don't have that belonging, am I going to, still feel that I have a job? Am I going to be able to do things in the same way? And so part of the first piece is being really clear that that is exactly what the direction that you're trying to take and what you're trying to measure in terms of success. So it's a measurement of the success piece that is paramount, not at a tactical level, but at a strategic level. So what are we trying to measure? What is success going to look like when we do that? Then you come back to baseline and then help the journey. The second piece is actually taking everyone on the journey. And what I mean is we came back into that communication process and that first, the 3 C's of agile leadership. it's like I have to change and adapt the way that I work with my guys, because I know that you know, Bob over here is going to need things in a slightly different way. I know that, you know, Billy over here is going to, I'm going to talk to her and bring her on a different, I'm still going to bring on the process, but I'm going to do agile leadership. So I'm going to think more, I'm going to prepare and understand my team enough to actually bring them on the journey with me, rather than here's a team presentation once a month, here's where we're at, this is what's going on, here's what you're going to need to do, here are the changes, and just get on with it. It's the journey of the change process and that communication efficiently and understanding and being aware of my team and what they need in an individual level, and how do I make them feel comfortable as part of that process. And then that comes back to that psychological safety. Do I have that sense of belonging? Am I okay? Is this going to be okay for me? Often the two things that don't match up is the success metric isn't right. So what we think is right isn't the right measures. We're not measuring the right stuff. And therefore that filters down into the team are confused, and there's chaos, and there's this continued change in direction, which creates unorganized chaos. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. So also, you know, when we talk about a change in a leadership style, and if we are sort of going to adopt agile leadership style, how do you see the middle management, the role of middle management in that?
Yeah, so one of the things I think with agile leadership and is about being agile, right? So being leaders rather than doing leaders. Traditionally, middle managers do manage, right? So when we're looking at, we've got to actually empower our middle managers to be agile or become agile. And I think one of the biggest areas that I see around in the work I do around middle managers is actually helping them to, because a lot of them may come from a technical leadership where they've been really good at a particular thing and they've been put into a middle management or a team lead role, and they're moving up, is actually having them be comfortable with, number one, who they are, and secondly, helping them define and understand more about the distinction between managing and leading, and then teaching them a lot of those observational aware skills, because that's the critical piece that I see is missing. And yet they're in this really, really important role where they've got to filter messages that are coming from, you know, leadership SLTs down to their teams, and also filtering messages back up. So it's about teaching them to be observationally aware, to understand and own their own personas in terms of what agile leadership means, and also being able to teach them to communicate more efficiently.
Okay. There is one interesting question, as when the agile leadership is applied from the top, it just cascades down. But if the organization is not practicing the agile leadership, how can you initiate that on whatever level you are in the organization or in the business?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And you know, I come back to the mirror, right? So we might talk about agile leadership and you'll go, yeah, we're an agile organization, we have agile leadership, right? We do agile leadership, but actually the reality is the mirror. So if the mirror is that we talk but we don't do, then the interesting dilemma the organization will always have is whatever that senior leadership team is doing is being mirrored through the organization. And so all you can do, because trying to continue to, if you're over here and the leadership team's here, trying to continue to have them be agile is going to be tough. especially if they say they do it, because you've got an inconsistency. You'll have tolerations of behaviours. There'll be little consequences. There'll be confused expectations. What you can do, though, is that you take your leadership pod and your team and you create Agile within that, and it almost cascades across rather than up, where you've got that. And once you've got 1 or 2 or 3 leadership pods that are working so well together in terms of Agile leadership, the results will speak for themselves.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody mentioned that with applying Agile leadership styles, it can be perceived as a loss of management control, as a management opposition, and which can create basically either a prolonged period of Agile leadership implementation or total resistance to it. So in terms of these perceived threats, especially losing the control, how do you balance the still ensuring, leaders cannot lose control because they are in control and they're accountable and responsible for the teams and the businesses that they lead. So how would you sort of justify that in that situation?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think that I have a slightly different perspective. Let's use a different lens on that, right? So leaders need to have control because they are responsible for the health of the organization, right? Clear, very clear, very, very clear. However, I want to really challenge that concept of control versus having power. Yeah, so having power and empowering doesn't mean that you've lost control, because you're still across what needs to be across, but you're empowering your individuals and your teams to actually show up and do their best work and work at their best potential, which is going to give you what you need, because you've now been inclusive and you've got this diversity in thought process and you've actually got the best people doing their best work. Versus control is always going to get not quite that. It's like 90-10. 90% you'll get, but it's the 10% that you'll miss, and it's the 10% that's so critical that you need, because they're just not going to give you that extra bit. And it's kind of the best way that I can explain it. And it's like when we go, if I'm sitting here as a leader going, but I don't want to lose control, then we're having the wrong conversation, because the conversation shouldn't be, I'm going to lose control. It's like, how can I empower my team to do what I need them to do, so I've still got power, and they're delivering for me, so I've still got control. So often it always comes back to our own need, and those of us who are dominant controllers, and we'll do a little bit in session 3, those of us that are dominant controllers like control because we want to be in control, because it's the fear of being out of control that is the thing that we don't want. And so there's an unwiring or an unlearning at that brain level to think about control in a different way.
Yeah, what I really liked, your explanation on diversity and inclusiveness, because, the way I see it, diversity is about ethnicity, gender, age, different backgrounds, which you can map and you can search and find the team. However, when it comes to inclusivity, it's a completely different game. It's about giving your diversified team the maximum opportunity to perform, to progress, to contribute, which is again, you know, depending on all of these diverse factors, will be different. So it's quite a lot of things that are involved in sort of mapping out what is actually that is going to give us the best out of ourselves first, then out of the teams and the organizations. So, you know, I really liked this part, and I hope everybody else enjoyed it. I am conscious of the time, so I wish to thank you.
Just on that, if I just do one thing to start, if anyone's sitting there right now going, okay, how do I start this? What I recommend you do is to just get a big board, if you've got, like I draw all over walls, and just start with 3 things, right? What does success look like for us at a high level? What is success? And draw the success, map it all out, and then come back to baseline. And that's a really nice starting point using your patterns. So what are the patterns that we're seeing in the organization today around that? What are the behaviors that we're seeing? And then, okay, so what do we want to change? And so that's your success. You come back to baseline, and then you can start the process. You've got it all out. It'll be really clear because you can distill it and then look at the journey. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, thank you so much for this. You know, this was really great. So I wish to thank you for dedicating your time and expertise to us, and for this captivating and insightful presentations, Rebecca, this evening. And on behalf of NAWIC, I would like to present you with an appreciation certificate.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
And I would also like to inform our attendees on upcoming events. So obviously, as we started, I talked about next two events that are related to leadership series webinars. The next one is on the 22nd of July, and that will be on the team performance and getting the best out of our teams. And on the 29th of July, we will have sort of, you know, to capture and to close the leadership subject for this month. We will have resilience and maximizing personal leadership potential. In August, we will host a webinar on construction claims during and after COVID-19, which is very current and hot topic. And we will make sure that our webinar will provide you with valuable information that you will be able to apply in your work or your position, or when it's required. Lastly, I would like to mention NAWIC membership. If you are not already our member, please look up www.nawic.qa. We have all the membership details there, and we would love you to join us. Thank you, Rebecca, again. And for the attendees, if you have any questions regarding the presentation, please contact Rebecca directly on her email, rebecca@paradigmshift.co.nz. And
fantastic.
now we can...
I'm sorry, I apologise for losing that screen, so we'll sort that for next time. But you will get all of those slides anyway, so.
Yeah, okay, it's okay. So thank you again, Rebecca, and thank you all, to all attendees for your time. We much appreciate you joining us tonight. Please submit your feedback if you haven't already done so in the question box, and stay safe and well. And we look forward for you joining us next week, the same time, the same place, for our second leadership series webinar on team performance. Good night from me.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good night.